Have you ever wondered what happens to a soul that lives without charity? What becomes of two people who share a home but not their hearts? And can a marriage survive when love has turned into cold silence? In 1858, across the hills of northern Italy, thousands of families carried a weight they could not name. They lived together, they ate together, they slept in the same beds, but their souls were strangers. This is not a story about divorce. This is about something far more dangerous. A slow death that happens while both people are still breathing. On a winter night in Turin, a man appeared at the bedside of Don Bosco. The priest was 53 years old. His body ached from decades of work with street boys. He had seen hell in his dreams. He had watched souls fall like stones into darkness. But what he saw that night would shake him in a different way. The visitor was not from this world. Don Bosco knew this immediately. The man's face carried the mark of purgatory, not the scream of hell, but the silent ache of souls who wait. The man stood at the foot of the bed without speaking. His eyes held a question Don Bosco had heard 1,000 times before. "Can you pray for me?" But then the man spoke, and what he said changed everything. "I lived with my wife for 32 years. We never once spoke with charity. If you value stories like this about the lives of saints and their visions, subscribe. It's the best way to support this work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the biographical memoirs of Saint John Bosco, compiled by Father Eugenio Caria between 1898 and 1930. 9. A 19-volume documentation that Pope Pius IX himself ordered Don Bosco to record word for word. And from 40 Dreams, of Saint John Bosco, published by Tan Books, a collection verified by the Salesian Society and used in the canonization process. These are not folklore. These are sworn testimonies from witnesses who lived with the saint. Now back to the story. 32 years? Don Bosco felt the weight of those words. 3 decades of waking up next to someone and choosing silence. 3 decades of meals without warmth. 3 decades of living like 2 boarders in a rented room. The soul continued. We were not enemies. We did not fight. We simply lived as if the other did not matter. I worked. She managed the house. We fulfilled our duties. But there was no charity, no tenderness, no mercy. And now I burn for it. Don Bosco had seen souls in purgatory before. In 1868, 10 years after this vision, he would dream of walking through that place of purification. He saw souls who had stolen, souls who had blasphemed, souls who had fallen into impurity. But among all the suffering souls he encountered throughout his ministry, none disturbed him more than those who had sinned through coldness, through the absence of love. Because that absence is invisible. You can measure theft. You can count blasphemies. You can see the wreckage of lust. But how do you measure the sin of never caring? How do you confess that you looked at your spouse every day and felt nothing? The church in the 19th century understood marriage as a sacrament. 7 sacraments, 7 channels of grace: baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, penance, anointing, holy orders, matrimony. Each one a visible sign of invisible grace. Each one a promise from God. But Don Bosco saw something that terrified him. He saw couples receiving the sacrament and then slowly starving it to death. In Turin, in 1858, the Industrial Revolution was grinding the city into dust. Factories opened. Peasants flooded in from the countryside. Men worked 16-hour shifts. Women managed homes without running water, without gaslight, without help. Children died of cholera at rates that would horrify us today. And in the middle of all this suffering, marriages became machines. You work, I work, we survive. That is all. Don Bosco walked the streets of Valdoco every day. The neighborhood where he built his oratory. The slum where boys slept under bridges and stole bread to live. He knew poverty. He knew what desperation did to families. But he also knew that poverty alone did not kill charity. He had seen poor families radiate warmth. He had seen mothers with nothing share everything. He had seen fathers broken by labor still find gentleness for their children. The death of charity was a choice, a slow choice, a choice made again and again, day after day, until it became a habit, until it became a life. The soul at Don Bosco's bedside did not weep. Souls in purgatory do not weep the way we do. They burn with a sorrow that is pure. They see clearly now what they refuse to see in life. The man saw his wife's face every morning for 32 years, 11,680 mornings. And how many times did he look at her with love? How many times did he speak a kind word without being asked? How many times did he put her needs before his comfort? He could not remember. That was the horror. He could not remember a single moment. Don Bosco asked the soul a question. Did you harm her? No. Did you abandon her? No. Did you betray her with another woman? No. Did you waste your money on drink or gambling? No. Then what was your sin? I forgot she had a soul. Those 7 words, that is what souls in purgatory carry. Not the dramatic sins we imagine, not the crimes that shock the world. The quiet sin of forgetting that the person next to you is made in the image of God, the sin of treating an eternal soul like a piece of furniture. Useful, expected, ignored. Don Bosco knew the teaching of St. Paul. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Wives, respect your husbands as you respect the Lord. This was not poetry. This was a command, a literal command with eternal consequences. Christ loved the church by dying for her, by pouring out every drop of blood, by thinking of nothing but her salvation even while nails ripped through his hands. That is the standard, not perfection, not constant happiness, but constant charity, constant willingness to die to yourself, constant choosing of the other's good even when it costs you everything. The soul in Don Bosco's room had never beaten his wife, never screamed at her, never humiliated her in public, but he also never protected her, never honored her, never saw her as Christ sees her. He saw her as a duty, and duties do not require love, they require completion. He completed 32 years of marriage, and now he burned. Don Bosco asked another question. Did she know you were cold to her? The soul paused. This was the deeper cut. Yes, she knew. She felt it every day. And what happened to her soul? Where is she now? The soul answered. She is here with me. We burn together. We finally speak with charity now. But it is too late to spare ourselves the fire. Two souls, married in the church, faithful to their vows in the legal sense. No adultery, no divorce, no scandal, but no charity. And now both in purgatory, learning through fire what they refused to learn through grace. Don Bosco had taught thousands of boys. He knew how to explain sin to a child. Stealing is wrong because you take what belongs to another. Lying is wrong because you deny the truth. Fighting is wrong because you harm your brother. Simple, clear. But how do you explain the sin of emotional absence? How do you make a boy understand that you can destroy someone without ever raising your hand? You teach them about charity, real charity. St. Paul's charity in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Charity is patient, charity is kind, charity does not envy, does not boast, is not proud, does not dishonor others, is not self-seeking, is not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs. Charity never fails. Read that list again, but backwards. Make it negative. What does the absence of charity look like? Impatient, unkind, envious, boastful, proud, dishonoring, self-seeking, easily angered, keeping score, and it always fails. That was the marriage of the soul who visited Don Bosco. 32 years of keeping score, 32 years of self-seeking, 32 years of impatience when one of them moved too slowly or spoke too much or needed too much or gave too little, 32 years of pride that refused to bend, refused to apologize, refused to say I was wrong and you were right and I am sorry and I love you. The mathematics of this are devastating. 32 years equals 11,680 days. Assume the couple was awake and in each other's presence for 10 hours per day. That is 116,800 hours. Almost 7 million minutes, 7 million opportunities to speak with charity, 7 million chances to show love, and the soul remembered none. Don Bosco understood something that modern marriage advice often misses. The problem is not communication. The problem is not compatibility. The problem is not unmet expectations or different love languages or personality conflicts. The problem is sin, the refusal to love sacrificially, the choice to make yourself the center instead of making Christ the center and your spouse the second. In 1859, 1 year after the vision of the married couple, Don Bosco founded the Salesian Society. He chose St. Francis de Sales as the patron. Francis de Sales wrote Introduction to the Devout Life in 1609. In that book, he has a chapter on married love. He says this, married love should be gentle, constant, and genuine. It must be supernatural, based not on beauty or talent or wealth or advantage, but on virtue and the image of God in the other person. Supernatural love. That phrase is crucial. Natural love rises and falls with feelings, with hormones, with circumstances, with the other person's behavior. Supernatural love flows from grace, from God's life in the soul, from the decision to will the good of the other regardless of cost. The soul in Don Bosco's vision had relied entirely on natural love, and natural love evaporates. It dries up like a stream in August. What remains is duty, and duty without love is slavery. Don Bosco saw this slavery everywhere in Turin. He saw it in the factories where men worked until their bodies broke. He saw it in the tenements where women scrubbed floors until their hands bled. And he saw it in marriages where two people shared a bed but nothing else. They stayed together because the church said divorce was forbidden, but they did not stay together in love. They stayed together in resentment, in bitterness, in cold, bitter silence. This is why Don Bosco emphasized the sacraments so heavily in his teaching. He told his boys, there are two things the devil is deadly afraid of: fervent communions and frequent visits to the Blessed Sacrament. Why? Because the Eucharist is pure charity, pure self-giving, Jesus holding nothing back. And when you receive that into your body, into your soul, you become what you eat. You become charity. You become self-giving. You become capable of supernatural love. But you have to go. You have to receive. You have to let grace work. The soul in purgatory had received communion, had gone to confession, had fulfilled the bare minimum requirements. But he had not let grace transform him. He had treated the sacraments like insurance, like a safety net that would catch him no matter how he lived, and now he learned the truth. Grace is not magic. It requires cooperation. It requires will. It requires the daily choice to die and let Christ live. St. Paul again. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. That is marriage. Two people crucified to themselves, two people letting Christ live through them, two people becoming one flesh, not just physically, but spiritually, sharing one mission, one purpose, the salvation of each other's souls and the souls of their children. The couple in Don Bosco's vision had no children. This detail matters. The Church teaches that marriage has two purposes: the unity of the spouses and the procreation and education of children. When you remove the second purpose, the first purpose becomes even more important. If you're not raising children together, then what are you doing? If your marriage produces no fruit, no new life, no saints for heaven, then it must at least be a school of charity, a place where two sinners learn to love like God loves. This couple failed. They turned their marriage into a tomb, two bodies living under one roof waiting to die. And when they died, they discovered that the tomb continued, but now it burned. Don Bosco asked the soul one final question: "What can I do for you?" Pray, and warn others. Tell them that it is not enough to avoid mortal sin. Tell them that coldness is a sin. Tell them that silence can be cruelty. Tell them that every day matters. Every word matters. Every small act of kindness or small act of contempt. It all matters, and it all has eternal weight. The soul faded. Don Bosco woke up. His hand was shaking. He lit a candle and sat at his desk. He wrote down every word. He kept these notes private for years, but he used the lessons in his preaching. He told his boys that when they grew up and married, they must love their wives with the love of Christ, not with feelings that change like weather, but with a decision that stands like stone, a decision to serve, to protect, to honor, to cherish, every day, without exception, until death. He told them that marriage is not a feeling. It is a vocation, a calling from God, a mission as serious as the priesthood. You make vows. You promise before God and the church and all the saints in heaven that you will love this person. And love is not a noun. It is a verb. It is action. It is sacrifice. It is blood. The boys who heard Don Bosco preach these things grew up. Some became priests. Some became workers. Some became fathers. And those who became fathers remembered. They remembered the saints' words about charity, about supernatural love, about the soul in purgatory who forgot his wife had a soul. In 1888, Don Bosco died. He was 72 years old. He had worked himself to exhaustion. He had built schools and churches and orphanages across Italy and beyond. He had written books and given retreats and heard confessions until his body gave out. On his deathbed, he gathered his Salesians around him. He told them three things: devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, devotion to Mary Help of Christians, devotion to the Holy Father. These three devotions would keep them in charity, would keep them from the cold death he had seen in so many souls. When Don Bosco's body was examined after death, the doctors found something unusual. His heart was enlarged, literally. The muscle had grown beyond normal size. Some said it was a medical condition, but the Salesians knew better. His heart had grown because he had loved so much. He had poured out charity for 60 years without stopping, and his heart had expanded to hold it all. This is what the married couple in purgatory had failed to do. They had protected their hearts, had kept them small and safe and closed, had rationed their love like it was a limited resource that might run out. And so their hearts had shriveled, had hardened, had turned to stone. The fire of purgatory was melting that stone, but it took time and pain, and the couple would remain there until every trace of coldness burned away, until their hearts were soft again, until they could finally love each other the way God always intended. Don Bosco's vision spread through the Salesian order in whispers. The official biographers did not include it in the early volumes. They focused on his miracles, his prophecies, his work with youth. But the story survived in the oral tradition. Old priests told young priests, and the young priests told their people. And slowly, the message spread. Marriage without charity is a living death, and the death does not end with the grave. The archives in Turin hold Don Bosco's notes, handwritten pages in Italian. He wrote about many souls who visited him, some from hell, some from purgatory, some from heaven. Each one had a message, each one revealed a truth, and the truth from the married couple was this: you cannot love God without loving your neighbor. And your closest neighbor is your spouse. If you fail to love them, you fail to love God. And God will purify that failure, if not in this life, then in the next. The vision happened in 1858. That same year, Bernadette Subrus saw the Virgin Mary in Lourdes. The messages were different but connected. Mary told Bernadette to pray for sinners, to do penance, to build a chapel. She gave the world a spring of healing water, a place where bodies were cured and souls were saved. Don Bosco's vision gave the world a warning, a reminder that the ordinary life, the daily life, the marriage life, is where most souls are won or lost, not in dramatic sins, but in small coldnesses, in tiny refusals, in the slow drift toward indifference. By 1870, 12 years after the vision, Italy had changed, the kingdom had unified, the church had lost the papal states. Anti-clericalism was rising. Don Bosco's work was constantly under threat, but he kept building, kept teaching, kept preaching, and he kept warning about the danger of lukewarm love. In 1877, he gave a conference in Nice on the opening of St. Peter's patronage. He spoke about charity, about the works of mercy, about sacrificing for others. He said, "You make sacrifices, but remember that Jesus Christ made a much greater sacrifice, and those who strive to imitate him in making sacrifices to save souls can rest assured they will be crowned with eternal joy." This was the answer to the vision. The couple in purgatory had made no sacrifices, had saved no souls, not even each other's. They had lived for themselves, had protected their comfort, had avoided discomfort, and now they paid. But Don Bosco also gave hope. He said that one good confession could restore a soul to the title of child of God. One sincere confession where you name the sin of coldness, where you admit, "I have failed to love. I have treated my spouse like a stranger. I have let our home become a cemetery. Forgive me." And then go home and change. Say the words you have not said. Show the kindness you have withheld. Break the silence with tenderness. It is never too late while you are still alive. That is the mercy of God. You can change, you can repent, you can learn to love, but you must start now, today, this hour. Because you do not know when death will come, and death freezes you in whatever state it finds you. If it finds you cold, you stay cold until fire melts you, and that fire is purgatory. The biographical memoirs record Don Bosco's encounters with over 150 souls. Most were his boys he had taught who died young. Some died in holiness and went straight to heaven. They came to thank him, to show him their glory, to encourage him to keep working. Others died in sin or died before they could fully purify themselves. They came to beg for prayers, to ask for masses, to plead for help. But the married couple was different. They were adults. They were not Don Bosco's direct responsibility. They had not been his students. Yet they came to him because he was known as a friend of the souls in purgatory. He prayed constantly for the dead. He offered masses. He encouraged others to pray. And the souls responded. They appeared. They spoke. They revealed the secrets of the next life. And the secret they revealed was this: love is not optional. It is not a bonus feature in marriage. It is the essence. It is the whole point. God created marriage to be an image of his love for the church. When you fail to love your spouse, you distort that image. You lie about who God is. And God will correct that lie, either here or there, either through grace or through fire. The vision ended without resolution. Don Bosco did not learn how long the couple would remain in purgatory. He did not learn their names or their hometown or the specific details of their coldness. He only knew that they had lived without charity and now they suffered for it. But he took the lesson seriously. In all his letters to the Salesian cooperators, the lay people who supported his work, he emphasized charity. He wrote, "Charity is patient, charity is kind, charity unites you with God in prayer through holy thoughts and devoted sentiments. You must be detached from the flattery of the world and striving toward holiness in the exercise of virtues." He wrote to married couples specifically. He told them that their vocation was as sacred as his, that they were called to save souls just as he was. The difference was that he saved the souls of boys through education. They saved the souls of each other and their children through daily love, through patient correction, through gentle encouragement, through the 1,000 small acts that build a home on the rock of Christ. Don Bosco died before the 20th century began. He never saw the sexual revolution, never saw no-fault divorce, never saw cohabitation replace marriage or pornography replace intimacy. But he saw the seeds. He saw the coldness. He saw marriages held together by law but hollowed out by selfishness. And he warned that the law was not enough, that external fidelity without internal charity was a grave sin. The vision of the married couple remains a minor footnote in Don Bosco's vast legacy. Most people know him for his schools, for his preventive system of education, for his devotion to Mary help of Christians, for his prophetic dreams about the church and the 2 columns of the Eucharist and Mary. But those who study his spiritual teachings closely find this vision, and they understand that it carries a message for every age. Marriage is a sacrament. It gives grace, but grace must be received, must be lived, must be renewed every day through acts of love. When you stop choosing to love, the grace stops flowing. The sacrament remains valid in the legal sense, but it becomes dead, and a dead sacrament does not save. It condemns. The couple learned this truth in the worst possible way. They learned it after death, after the moment of choice had passed. They could not go back, could not redo those 32 years, could only burn until the coldness melted, until they became capable of the love they had refused. Don Bosco wanted to spare others that fate. He wanted couples to wake up while there was still time, to see their spouse with new eyes, to recognize the image of God in the person across the table, the person next to them in bed, the person they had ignored for years. He wanted them to speak, to break the silence, to say, "I am sorry, I have been cold. I have treated you like you do not matter, but you do matter. You matter to God, you matter to me, and I want to learn to love you the way Christ loves the church." Those words are the beginning of resurrection, the beginning of new life, the beginning of a marriage that reflects God instead of mocking him. In the Salesian archives, there is a letter Don Bosco wrote in 1885, 3 years before his death. He was writing to a cooperator who had asked about marriage and purgatory. Don Bosco's response was brief. He said, "Pray for your spouse every day. Thank God for them every day. Serve them every day. And when you fail, which you will, confess it and begin again. This is how you avoid purgatory, not by being perfect, but by never giving up on love." That letter is kept in a folder marked Spiritual Direction. Hundreds of similar letters surround it. Don Bosco spent his final years in near constant pain, but he still wrote, still counseled, still poured out his heart for the salvation of souls. When his body was exhumed for the canonization process, it had not corrupted. This is common among saints. But what struck the examiners was the expression on his face: peace, pure peace, the peace of someone who had loved without holding back, who had given everything, who had nothing left to burn away in purgatory. The married couple in the vision will eventually reach that same peace, but only after the fire does its work, only after every trace of selfishness melts, only after they learn through pain what they refuse to learn through grace. Don Bosco's message to the living is simple. Do not wait. Do not assume you have time. Do not treat your spouse like a stranger. Speak with charity today. Show love today. Die to yourself today. Because tomorrow is not promised, and eternity is very long. The vision had practical consequences in Don Bosco's daily ministry. After that night, in 1858, he began including marriage in his spiritual direction. Boys who came to the oratory heard not just about purity and honesty and hard work, they heard about preparing for marriage, about choosing a spouse based on virtue, not just attraction, about understanding that marriage was a cross to carry, not a comfort to enjoy. He told them stories, real stories from the confessional, changed enough to protect privacy, but true in their essentials. He told them about the man who went to confession every Easter and Christmas for 20 years, who never missed, who believed he was in a state of grace, until one Easter, the priest asked him, "How do you treat your wife?" And the man said, "I provide for her. I do not beat her. I do not drink." "What more does she want?" The priest asked again. "Do you speak to her with kindness? Do you ask about her day? Do you help her when she's tired? Do you thank her for her work?" The man was silent. He had never thought of these things as matters of confession. He had thought only of avoiding big sins: murder, theft, adultery. He had not known that coldness was a sin, that ingratitude was a sin, that treating your wife like a servant was a sin. The priest gave him a penance. Go home and thank your wife for one thing every day for a month, then come back to confession. The man obeyed. It was awkward at first. His wife was suspicious, but slowly something changed. The words of thanks opened a door that had been sealed for years. The wife began to speak, to share her thoughts, to laugh, and the man realized what he had lost, what he had thrown away through his coldness. He came back to confession weeping. "Father, I have wasted 20 years. I had a treasure in my home, and I treated it like garbage." The priest absolved him and told him, "You have not wasted everything. You still have today. Start again." Don Bosco told this story to his boys in the oratory. He told it in the 1860s, after the vision. He told it in the 70s. He told it until his voice gave out, because he knew that most of his boys would marry, would become husbands and fathers, and he wanted to plant in their souls a horror of coldness, a deep, visceral rejection of the sin that masquerades as normal life. In 1862, 4 years after the vision, Don Bosco had another dream, the famous dream of the two columns, the Pope steering the bark of the church between enemy ships, two massive columns rising from the sea, one topped with the Eucharist, one topped with a statue of Mary, help of Christians. The Pope is killed. A new Pope takes the helm, steers the ship to the columns, anchors it there, and the enemy ships flee. This dream has been interpreted 1,000 ways. Most focus on the church's trials, on modernism, on persecution. But there's another layer. The two columns are the sacraments and devotion to Mary. The ship is every soul, and the enemies are not just external heresies. They are internal sins: pride, lust, greed, and coldness. the quiet, respectable sin that kills slowly. To anchor the ship at the columns means to live by the sacraments, to receive the Eucharist with devotion, to confess regularly, to invoke Mary's help. This is how you fight coldness. This is how you keep charity alive, not through willpower alone, not through human effort, but through grace, through the constant flow of divine life into your soul. Don Bosco knew that marriage without grace was doomed. He had seen too many couples try to love on their own strength, and he had watched them fail, watched them drift into resentment and boredom and quiet hatred. The only marriages that survived were the ones anchored to the two columns, the ones where both spouses fed on the Eucharist and prayed to Mary and let grace do what nature could not. The soul from the vision had been Catholic, had believed in the sacraments. But belief is not enough. You must use them, must immerse yourself in them, must let them transform you from the inside out. Otherwise, they are like medicine left in the bottle, like food left on the table. They do not help unless you take them in. In Don Bosco's time, most Catholics went to confession once a year. Easter duty, that was the minimum. And for many, the minimum was all they did. They did not understand that confession was meant to be frequent, weekly if possible, because sin accumulates. Coldness builds up like ice on a window, a little each day, until you can no longer see through it, until your soul is blind. Don Bosco preached frequent confession to his boys. He told them that the two things the devil fears most are fervent communions and frequent visits to the Blessed Sacrament. Why? Because these practices keep the soul soft, keep it warm, keep it open to grace. The devil wants you hard, wants you cold, wants you closed, because a cold soul does not love, and a soul that does not love will not go to heaven. After 1868, when Don Bosco had his terrifying vision of hell, it became even more urgent. He saw boys he knew falling into the pit, saw the traps that caught them, pride, disobedience, dishonesty, impurity. Each sin was a rope that bound them and dragged them down. And the only weapons against these ropes were confession and communion, the hammer and anvil that broke the bonds. He applied this same logic to marriage. The ropes that bind a marriage are different from the ropes that bind youth. Not wild passion, not reckless crime, but slow neglect, habitual selfishness, chronic impatience, the accumulation of 1,000 small refusals to love. And the only weapons are the same: confession to name the sin, communion to receive the strength to change, and prayer to Mary to obtain the grace to persevere. The couple in the vision had these weapons available. The church in Turin in 1858 was alive. Masses every morning, confessions every Saturday, devotions to Mary, sodalities and confraternities, plenty of opportunities for grace, but they had not taken advantage, had not seen the need, had thought their coldness was normal, had thought it did not matter as long as they stayed together. Now they knew better. Now they saw the truth with perfect clarity. But knowledge after death is useless for changing the past. It can only purify the soul for the future, can only burn away the attachment to sin, can only prepare you for the heaven you rejected on earth. Don Bosco understood purgatory better than most theologians, not because he had studied more books, but because he had seen it, had walked through it in his dreams, had spoken with souls who lived there. The pain in purgatory is proportional to the sin, but coldness in marriage is not a small sin. It touches everything. It affects your spouse, your children, your neighbors who see your example, your own soul which withers without love. Don Bosco wanted to spare people that fire, not because he was soft on sin, but because he loved souls. This is why he emphasized the preventive system. Prevention, not punishment. Build virtue before vice takes root. Prevent coldness before it begins. Establish charity from the first day. Make love a habit before indifference becomes one. He told engaged couples to pray together before marriage, to go to confession together, to receive communion together, to ask Mary to bless their union, to start as they meant to continue. If you begin with prayer, you will sustain with prayer. If you begin with the sacraments, you will return to them when things get hard. But if you begin with only human love, only natural attraction, only romantic feeling, you will fall when those things fade. And they always fade. That was Don Bosco's brutal honesty. Romantic love is beautiful, but it is not enough. It lasts a few months, maybe a few years if you are lucky. Then reality sets in, differences emerge, flaws become visible. The person you married is not the person you imagined. And if all you have is feeling, you will panic, will resent, will look for escape. But if you have charity, you will stay, will serve, will sacrifice. Because charity is not feeling, it is will. It is the decision to seek the good of the other even when they fail you, even when they hurt you. The couple in purgatory had lost this, or perhaps never had it. They had not built their marriage on the rock, they had built on sand, and when storms came, the house collapsed. Not visibly, it still stood, but inside, it was empty. No life, no warmth, no home. Don Bosco told his Salesians that the oratory had to be a home where boys felt loved, where they felt safe. This required incredible effort, required the priests to be always available, always patient, always kind. Many wanted to quit, but Don Bosco insisted, love or leave. If you cannot love these boys, you cannot work here. The same standard applies to marriage. Love or leave. But in marriage, you cannot leave. The vow is permanent. So you must love, must learn to love, must beg God for the grace to love. The vision of the married couple was a warning against marrying for the wrong reasons, for money, for status, for escape. These reasons do not sustain. They leave you trapped with no spiritual connection. That trap becomes purgatory on earth, then purgatory after death. But why suffer so much? Why waste your life in coldness? Why not choose love now? Why not open your heart now? These were Don Bosco's questions. And some listened, some changed. Some went home and spoke with charity for the first time in years, and their marriages were saved. But many did not listen, thought Don Bosco was exaggerating, thought coldness was not really a sin. They were wrong, and they learned it in purgatory. Don Bosco died in January 1888, the 31st, a Tuesday. He had been declining for months, 72 years of work without rest. His mind was clear until the end. He gathered his Salesians, gave final instructions, devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, devotion to Mary, devotion to the Pope. Then he spoke about charity, about loving the boys, about never giving up on them. He said, I regret that I did not do more. I could have loved more. This from a man who had saved thousands, who had built schools and churches, who had worked miracles. And still he said, I could have done more. That is the heart of a saint, never satisfied, always reaching for perfect love. The couple in purgatory would eventually reach that same heart. But only through fire, only through the burning away of all self-satisfaction, all complacency, all the lies they told themselves about being good enough. They were not good enough. None of us are. That is why we need grace, why we need the sacraments, why we need Mary, why we need the church. Because left to ourselves, we fail. We fall, we freeze, but with grace we can love, can thaw, can burn with charity instead of burning in purgatory, can give ourselves away in life instead of having ourselves taken away in death. Don Bosco's final words were Jesus, Mary, Joseph, the Holy Family, the model of all families. Jesus who obeyed, Mary who pondered, Joseph who protected. 3 persons, 1 love, 1 mission, 1 home. Every marriage is called to be an image of that Holy Family, not in perfection, not in sinlessness, but in charity, in daily choosing, in constant conversion, in the willingness to die and rise again, every day, every hour, every moment. The soul who visited Don Bosco that night in 1858 is still in purgatory, or has left it by now. Don Bosco offered masses for all the souls who appeared to him, prayed for them daily, taught his boys to pray for them, and the souls were eventually released. How long it took, we do not know. The Church does not reveal these things, but we trust in God's mercy. Trust that the fire accomplished its work. Trust that the couple learned to love, and that they now enjoy together in heaven what they refused together on earth. This is the final word. Heaven is for lovers, not lovers of pleasure, not lovers of self, but lovers of God and neighbor, those who have given everything, who have held nothing back, who have made themselves nothing so that God could make them everything. The narrow gate that Christ spoke of is charity. Die to yourself and live. Refuse to die and perish. It is that simple, that brutal, that beautiful. And marriage is the crucible where most people face that choice, where the rubber meets the road, where theory becomes practice, where you either love or you lie,